Thank you, everybody, for joining us here tonight. I'm Keith Shue with Nuclear New York. This is our third Tuesday meeting. We do this every month. Let me tell you a little bit about who we are. Independent, we're nonprofit. We're a nonpartisan organization, 501c3. Our goal is to advance a prosperous, decarbonized future while supporting nature conservation. That's so I get to say, what my philosophy on this is. I'm an engineer myself. I'm also a pretty hardcore environmentalist. Those who know me know that. So what I tell people is that I support nuclear because I know we need it. We need the reliable baseload energy. But I love nuclear because it lets us tackle climate change without destroying the environment. Because it has such a small physical footprint, it has a very small impact on nature, and so that's why I'm a big fan of nuclear. But let me tell you about what we focus on here. We do research. We do public education. That's a big part of our mission. As you all know, there's a lot of misinformation out there about nuclear. We try to set the record straight. Policy advocacy. There's a lot going on in here in New York. I'll talk about that in a second. And we're all about thoughtful, non-intrusive engagement. So we're not going to be yelling at you through a megaphone or anything like that. That's not who we are. Next slide. So let me tell you a little bit about what's been going on since our last meeting last month. We've made some news. Nuclear New York we're making a name for ourselves apparently because our contribution to sensible energy policy is now recognized in the magazine City and State. Dietmar Dietering, who's pictured here and who's joined us here on in the engagement tonight, was the focus of attention. And the City and State magazine, they highlighted a select group of executives, of advocates, decision makers that are shaping New York's energy future, and New York is now among them. So we appreciate the recognition, and we're proud to be continuing to advance clean, compact, reliable energy. Something else happened just a day ago, which is pretty exciting. The U.S. Department of Energy awarded Constellation a grant for early site permit application for advanced nuclear. Now, Constellation is the nuclear company that has the plants here in New York State, and they actually have the largest number of nuclear plants in the country. But they received a $17 million grant, so that's going to help them put forward an application to 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 uh, to apply for building another reactor, another advanced reactor, maybe more than one, at its 9 Mile Point facility. So that's pretty exciting. That's up in Oswego County, not to be confused with Otsego County, but Oswego County on Lake Ontario. And Oswego County is actually one of 8 upstate communities that have expressed interest in nuclear. So there's actually quite an outcry upstate of places that want this clean, reliable, carbon-free energy. Um, Another thing that happened more on a national scene, actually worldwide scene, is you saw you're seeing the merger of two big utilities, NextEra Energy and Dominion Energy. Combined, they are going to have a massive resource potential. They will become the second largest nuclear fleet in the country. But it's not just that. They also invest in renewables. They also invest in natural gas. They do it all. But we're talking about 14 reactors that would be under this emerged company, 12.5 gigawatts of capacity. And there's more to come when we restart the Duane Arnold nuclear reactor. That's gonna add to that capacity, and there are other places that are ripe for expansion too that are within the auspices of this larger company. Turkey Point in Florida is an example of a reactor that could be expanding there. Um, so I'd like to hand it over for a minute to Boomy if she's with us. Boomy, are you with us here right now?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're gearing up for in September?
Yeah. So, hi everyone, I'm Bhumi. I manage the operations for Nuclear New York, but also direct our annual Nuclear Symposium, which always happens during the New York City Climate Week. For people who don't know what the Climate Week is, it's a week dedicated to events around energy, renewable energy, and climate. We have been doing the Nuclear Symposium every year for the past 3, 4 years now, and this is um, a 1.5 days event. It's going to be we're going to be hosting it at Cornell Tech campus at Roosevelt Island. And the first day is going to be focused on New York and Northeast region. So if anybody of you is interested in attending this symposium, participating in it, bringing up the issues you face or the questions you have, network with people, then keep an eye out on the mailing list. We will be opening the registration soon, or also follow us on social media.
That, that's awesome. Thank you, Boomy. Yeah, we're all working hard to make that a great event. And this time, like she said, it's going to be 2 days. So we're going to be focusing on what's happening here in New York. There's a lot going on. On to our great speaker that we've got lined up here for tonight. Let me just do a little intro here. Reliable, abundant energy. That's what we get with nuclear power, and it's versatile. What you're looking at here is a picture of all the things that you can do with nuclear power. It's not just electricity generation. You can also use the heat for various applications. You can combine the heat with the electricity to do other things. So you have grid delivered electricity, which we know is important. Also, perhaps behind the meter electricity for industry, for manufacturing. Um, Combining heat with electricity, you can do hydrogen production, you can do synthetic fuel production, direct air capture, seawater desalination. All these things require a lot of electricity, a lot of energy, and a lot of heat to do them. Combining those two, you can get that. You can also do industrial process heating, district heating potentially with nuclear power. So some of those things you might have heard about, but there's another application that a kind of a cottage industry of the nuclear power sector that's also going on. It's pretty neat. It's making medical isotopes to help save lives. And so with that, I want to introduce our speaker tonight, which is Jessica Dominici. She's a nuclear engineer and medical physics resident with Novant Health. And she's going to be talking to us about nuclear energy and life-saving medical isotopes. So, with that, Jessica, why don't you take it over? Tell us what a medical physics resident is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure for me to be here this evening. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So today I'm going to be talking about medical physics. I believe you can see my slide now. Can you just verify that you can see everything okay? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Very cool. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about the role of technology in modern medicine. First, a little bit about me before I dive into what a medical physics resident does. I was born and raised in Tampa, Florida originally, and I stayed in Florida to get a nuclear engineering degree from UF. While I was there, I did research with NASA to simulate cosmic radiation on different stuff they were using for their satellites. After going to University of Florida, I moved to North Carolina, where I currently live. I went to Duke University and I worked more on the medical side now. Some of my projects were in interventional radiology, so that's surgery where you have real-time X-ray. And then my other research project, anytime you do clinical trials for any kind of chemo, drug, or anything like that, we'll have to go through mouse clinical trials. Sometimes we're testing out new radiation schemes, so they actually go through like a full cancer treatment. And I was a mouse medical physicist. I was in charge of their treatment and their radiation schemes. After school, I moved a couple hours away to Wilmington, North Carolina, where I'm a resident. So I'm in the field of radiation therapy. And so it's like halfway between being an engineer and being between a physician. So you have to go through a 2-year residency and become American Board of Radiology certified to practice. Because every day I work on these machines called linear accelerators. And there's also different types of linear accelerators, like a proton accelerator. And I'm basically in charge of this machinery, making sure it's working properly and helping develop safe radiation treatment plans. So what is medical physics? Medical physics is the application of physics to the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of human diseases with the specific goal of improving human health and well-being. So a little early history, this is going to mirror a lot of what the nuclear industry is based off of. So in 1895, Rodkin discovered the X-ray, and that's how we first got our diagnostic radiology, because he started taking medical X-ray images, and there's this very famous photo of him with his hand. And year after that, we discovered natural radioactivity, and this is really important for our field because it discovered that radiation can come from materials and not just machinery. 1 year following that, J.J. Thomson discovered the electron. And then in 1898, Marie and Marie Curie isolated and studied polonium and radium. So this made radioactivity a quantifiable and measurable phenomenon. And then really shortly after that, we're already seeing people getting cancer treatment with radium sources. So in the images to the right, you'll see that these people have skin lesions, and there's actually radium being placed over that, and it's irradiating and killing the cancerous cell, leaving behind the healthy tissue, because cancer is more radiosensitive than our healthy tissues. So what's really cool about this is we still use this technique today, and I'll talk about that a little more. But that's called brachytherapy, in which we use sources that are either placed in or directly next to the tumor. And yeah, it's still used today. Another thing that Marie Curie did was she developed mobile X-ray units for World War I. And like I was talking about before, she turned radium therapy into an actually organized medical program and created an institute in Paris. So there are different branches of medical physics. The first one is diagnostic imaging. So that's going to be your X-rays, CTs, MRIs, ultrasounds, all things to help diagnose diseases. Nuclear medicine is sometimes considered diagnostic imaging because nuclear medicine is also used to diagnose diseases. But I personally like to separate them because in diagnostic imaging, radiation or sound waves or magnetic fields come from outside the body. And in nuclear medicine, we are actually injecting the patient with a radiopharmaceutical. And then there's cameras and detectors placed around the patient that will then pick up those traces. And that's how we get our images. The third one is radiation therapy. That's currently what I'm in residency for and what I consider myself more of an expert in. So this is going to be the use of radiation to actually kill cells, specifically cancerous cells, or sometimes there's like other diseases that you would want to eradicate with radiation. And that can be done with external beam radiation therapy or brachytherapy, like I was talking about previously. And then the last field, nuclear field, has this as well. It's house physics. These are the people that go around making sure that we're abiding by like NRC codes, our licenses, we're doing a radiation safety program. The two ones I'm going to talk about today, because I'm specifically going to talk about radionuclides that are used in medical physics. So I'm going to focus on nuclear medicine and radiation therapy, and I'm going to focus specifically on isotopes that we get from reactors. So I'm going to start with nuclear medicine. So we're going to start with the first kind of procedure you can get, nuclear medicine. It's called a gamma camera. So for this procedure, a patient will be given a small amount of a radioactive tracer. They'll either be injected, they can swallow it, they can breathe it in. And this tracer will travel to a specific organ or tissue. The tracer will then decay in the body, and it'll give off gamma rays that are then detected outside of the body. This is really important because it's not just showing anatomy like an X-ray or CT does. It's showing the function of the organ, like what areas are metabolically relevant, where are certain types of cells. So it's very, very important for the functionality of organs and to study them. And then if the camera that we place around the patient rotates around the patient, it calls an image study called SPECT. So just a brief refresher on what kinds of radiation we have and their penetrating power. So for nuclear medicine, we're looking at gamma radiation because it needs to be able to exit the body and be picked up by a camera. So our radionuclides we use in nuclear medicine are going to be gamma emitters. So the first one I'm going to talk about is technetium-99m, and this is the most used radionuclide in nuclear medicine. It's going to account for about 80% of our procedures. So the technetium-99m is going to be the radioactive signal that's decayed and picked up by the cameras. But this can be attached to a bunch of different chemical compounds. The chemical compound is going to be where it actually goes in the body. So for instance, you're going to attach it to a chemical that gets picked up by our bones, and that's used for bone scans. A lot of cancers, unfortunately, like to travel to the bone. Prostate cancer is one of the notorious ones for spreading through the nodes to the bone. And so if you've ever had prostate cancer and you're in recovery, you're going to be getting a bone scan probably yearly. It can also be used for myocardial perfusion imaging, which is a fancy word for blood flow in your heart. It could be used for lung function, renal function, which is your kidneys, liver, spleen, gallbladder, different functions. It's still the same technetium-99m, but once again, just add it to a different chemical compound that dictates where it travels in the body. I just thought this was cool. This is the myocardial perfusion study. So what you'll do for this is you'll get a patient running on a treadmill, and it kind of acts like as a stress test to see how their heart is reacting under higher cardio situations and to make sure the blood flow is running as anticipated. So how is technetium-99 made? So you're going to have a research reactor or even a power reactor in some cases. What we normally have in a reactor is the uranium-235, and that will naturally produce different fission products. And one of those is molybdenum-99. Molybdenum-99 has a much longer half-life than technetium-99, so that's what we actually take from the reactor. It's shipped, and then in order for it to become technetium-99m, there'll be a generator system that will separate it out, and then there'll be preparation and insertion into the patient's body. To talk a little bit about these generators, so basically there's this aluminum column that the molybdenum is loaded into, and as it decays, it will produce technetium-99m. When sterile saline is passed through that column, the technetium-99 will wash off and become separated, while the Mo-99 remains bound to the column. But the molybdenum will continue to decay and produce more technetium, so it's called a generator because it keeps generating the technetium-99m that we need. And technetium-99m has a very, very short half-life on the order of hours, which is why we have to have this generator. So where does this come from? Major suppliers are from Australia, Europe, South Africa, Canada with the Darlington Power Reactor, and then other contributors are Russia and other accelerator projects. So I think the main question is, why is our most common nuclear medicine agent reliant on foreign producers? I personally believe this is something we should be trying to produce in state. But it seems like we're really heavily relying on other countries, and I'll talk about the problems with that towards the end of the slide deck. As far as the supply chain, once again, supply chains are time sensitive because molybdenum-99 only has a couple day half-life. And so if there's any kind of reactor shutdown or transportation issues, you can't use it. It's pretty much wasted. Like I was talking about previously, I would love if we started producing this domestically. And so the National Nuclear Security Administration created and funded Shine Technologies. And this is a $32 million facility that's being made in Wisconsin. That's about 75% complete today. And that's going to be where we produce Mo-99. Another thing to keep in mind is that there used to be molybdenum was made with like highly enriched uranium, and luckily that has now switched to the low enriched uranium, so there's less proliferation issues. All right, moving on to one of our other radionuclides we use in nuclear medicine, iodine-131. It has a half-life of about 8 days. It will emit the beta particles and gamma photons. And this is something typically we give to the patient that they ingest in the form of an oral capsule or liquid. The reason why iodine-131 naturally travels to the thyroid is because in order to make thyroid hormone, our bodies uptake iodine. So it's using that natural mechanism to go to thyroid tissue and thyroid cancer cells that may be present throughout the body. So there's two different ways this can be made. Once again, it could be a natural fission product, and then you then separate it and then purify it and then ship it out. Or you can put a telluranium target inside a reactor, and that will then decay to iodine-131, and then you can pull it out, separate it, purify it, and then it's shipped to the hospitals. So some of the global supply chain we use is from South Africa, Europe, Australia, Canada, and we do produce iodine-131 in the United States. So there's the University of Missouri Research Reactor, and that's our supply of domestic iodine-131. This reactor came online in 2018, and it was really important because it marked the first time in over 30 years that the US was able to produce its own iodine-131. However, iodine-131 supply is still fragile because it still depends on a very limited number of reactor and processing facilities. And then the last nuclear medicine radionuclide I'll talk about is xenon-133, half-life of about 5 days. Once again, has gamma and beta emissions. And this with this radionuclide, the patient's actually going to inhale it. And this will help us see how air moves throughout the lungs and determine if there's bad ventilation of the lungs. So in this procedure, the patient will inhale xenon-131 to show the initial distribution of air in the lungs. They'll continue to breathe in that gas. And then finally, the patient will be given air or oxygen, and then we'll track how the xenon-131 clears from the lung. And that can let us know if there's any kind of obstructive disease within the lung. So same thing as the other ones, it's a naturally produced fission product. We have to separate it out and then we ship it out in gas form where it's then inhaled by the patient. On this slide, there's some images of how that capsule would normally come. And then common suppliers for this are Canada, Belgium, Netherlands. The United States is completely reliant on foreign manufacturers for this. And once again, the same issues that you're having with energy, with aging reactors, is still a problem for this radionuclides. Okay, I'm going to take a quick sip of water. I'm going to talk a little bit about PET-CT because I think when a lot of people hear nuclear medicine, they associate it with PET. And so PET is a double positron annihilation event. And so what happens is a radioactive glucose called FTG will be injected into the patient, and sugar loves to travel to where we're active, and tumors are super active, your brain's super active. So your body's going to uptake that FTG in that area. The FTG will give off signals that the PET scanner detects because it's a scintillation detector, and it'll create an image of the metabolic activity throughout the body. This information needs to be paired with an actual anatomical image of the patient, so a CT will be performed in the same session. Those will be combined so doctors can match function with location. And like I said, this is used commonly for cancer imaging. And then I have a little illustration of the patient getting the CT, and that's a quick process that only takes on the order of seconds. But then the scintillation, they'll lie there for like 30 minutes while the scintillators and detectors pick up the radio tracer. These are not made in reactors, but I did just want to mention them because once again, I think a lot of people have heard the word PET, but most common PET radionuclides are going to be cyclotron or accelerator produced because it's best made by charged particle interactions. What's really neat about this is most hospitals or larger systems have a nearby cyclotron, so they're not having to deal with that international transport issue. Once again, accelerator made, but I know a lot of people have heard the word PET, so I just wanted to include it as well. So this is the newest field in medical physics. It's called theranostics. So now you're using radioactive isotopes, but instead of just diagnosing, at the same time, these radioactive isotopes will identify and attack cancerous lesions. So it's a combination of nuclear medicine and radiation therapy. In this, targeted agents will bind to specific cancer receptors to deliver localized radiation while minimizing damage to healthy tissues. And this is primarily used for advanced metastatic cancers. When I say the word metastatic, that means the cancer has spread from where it originally came from. So I previously talked about prostate cancer likes to spread through the lymph nodes into the bones. Once it spreads outside of the prostate, we call that a metastatic cancer because it's going from where it originated to somewhere else in the body. So theranostics is really good for metastatic cancers because in radiation therapy, we can only hit big, very visible targets. In theranostics, you can hit multiple little targets all throughout the body. So yeah, prostate cancer is one we use this for. We do this for neuroendocrine tumors and thyroid cancer as well. And just back to this graph, now that we're talking about actually damaging tissues, we don't want to travel that far within the body. So we're going to be looking at alpha and beta emitters for these radionuclides. So iodine-131, which I've already talked about from the nuclear medicine standpoint, can actually be administered in a higher activity so that its beta particles deposit enough dose to locally damage and kill thyroid cells. I kind of think this is funny because I once had a cat who had hyperthyroidism and she was literally radioactive because they gave her this treatment and my cat uptaked it, and she was radioactive and I had like special instructions for taking her home. But the really cool thing about this is, once again, it's not just acting as a cell killer, it can actually be imaged to confirm that the patient uptaked it correctly. And then you can do scans over time to show the lessening of the thyroid disease. So if you look at the image in the bottom right, you'll see there's little nodules where thyroid cancers have spread. And then if you look on the right, there's less of those little nodules. Now, since this is an oral capsule, you can see that the stomach's lighting up. But like I mentioned briefly before, cancer cells have properties that make them more radiosensitive than our normal healthy cells. So some patients that are going through this could get nausea, and sometimes they get dry mouth because it gets in their salivary glands. But overall, that is recoverable. But the cancer cells are radiosensitive, so they can't recover. The next kind of theranostic I'm going to talk about that we use is yttrium-90 microspheres. So this will be delivered through the hepatic arterial system. Hepatic means liver, so this is a liver treatment. So the microspheres will be placed in a catheter through the patient's blood vessels until they reach the liver. And then the microspheres will be released and they lodge themselves within the tumor blood vessels and they deliver a high local beta dose. So something that's a property of cancers is that they actually create their own blood flow and they create their own vascular system within the cancer. And these are really, really tiny blood vessels. So the microspheres actually are too big to pass. So they get lodged in and deliver their dose right where the tumors are. There's two types of spheres. The most common one's going to be the glass microsphere. This is actually like a biocompatible glass sphere that yttrium-90 is put inside, and then the yttrium-90 glass spheres are then put into a reactor and activated. The less common type is a resin microsphere, which my current clinic doesn't use. But I have a little animation of that too. So during surgery, under X-ray guidance, a surgeon will actually put in this catheter through the aorta, and then using the real-time imaging, they'll find the correct artery, and then they'll release the Y90 spheres into that artery. So I have a little GIF there for that. And then I've already mentioned this, but you'll actually take the biocompatible glass with the yttrium source, place it into a reactor, and that's where it becomes activated and radioactive. So for the supply chain, there's two main device manufacturers. One of them is Boston Scientific for TheraSphere, and then the other one is Certex for the resin spheres. We do produce yttrium-90 domestically with the University of Missouri Research Reactor, and that's our dominant source. But it also can come from the Netherlands, Canada, like the Darlington CANDU reactors, China, Vietnam's even looking into developing it, and Australia as well for the resin. All right. The next one is called lutetium-177 PSMA agent. The brand name for this is Pluvicto, and this is going to treat prostate cancers. PSMA is called prostate-specific membrane antigen. And so whenever somebody gets prostate cancer or has prostate cells throughout their body, this agent is released, and that's what the Pluvicto is connected to chemically that will have it travel to that metastatic resistant prostate cancer. So if you look at the screen, you can see this person has really bad metastatic prostate cancer. This would be like a stage 4. It's all over their bones. It's in their ribs. And then we inject them and do multiple cycles with Pluvicto. And you can see this patient have like amazing response, and a lot of their metastatic disease was killed. People do, when they get like any kind of radioactive procedure like this, they filter it through the kidneys and through the bladder. So that's why you see the kidneys and the bladder lighting up on the scan. But once again, it's less radiosensitive than cancer cells. So how is this made? You place Yttrium, I'm bad at pronouncing this one, sorry, full disclosure, but 176, you place that target into a reactor, and then that then becomes lutetium-177. You'll go ahead and separate that. You'll attach it to the PSMA ligand, which is how we're able to localize just to cancer cells. And then we'll give it to the patient. We'll inject it through like a sharp needle or through like a saline solution. The supply chain for this, myrrh is the dominant domestic source, but the SHINE project we also have is already operational for lutetium-177. In Canada, they produce this in the Bruce Power commercial reactor. Germany, the Netherlands, France, and South Africa also have reactors that produce this. The main bottleneck for this is for lutetium-177, you already need the yttrium-176, and the main global supplier for that is Russia, which heard about the news in the past 5 years. We're not actually on good relations with them right now. And so right now there's projects in Canada that's trying to lessen Russian reliance on this source. And then Orano, Oak Ridge National Lab, is also increasing capacity because Pluvicto is growing like crazy. Like every single hospital wants to get this therapy because it's just been really, really successful for people with persistent prostate cancers. So lutetium-177 is just the radioactive part, but since it can be connected to a different molecule, it can also be used for neuroendocrine tumors, and we call that lutetium-177 dotatate, and the brand name for that is Lutathera. It's the same kind of thing I was telling you about with the prostate cancer. You can see they have tons of metastatic disease throughout their whole body. They'll go through different cycles and will irradiate and kill the cancerous cells. And then another one we can use for the prostate is radium-223. The brand name for this is Xofigo. Bayer actually makes it, so you know, like Bayer aspirin, like you just take baby aspirin. That's the same company. They own Xofigo. And this is actually an alpha emitter, not a beta emitter. And this is specifically attached to a chemical that localizes to increased areas of bone turnover. So when a person has cancer in their bone, cancer is very malignant and fast growing, so it causes a lot of bone turnover, so it can localize to those areas. So for radium-223, we start with radium-226. We put that into a reactor. It'll create thorium-227, which will then alpha decay into radium-223. We'll separate it out, do the separation and formulation process, and inject it into the patient. So the supply chain for this, Oak Ridge National Lab and Department of Energy has an isotope reactor program that is the most important supplier for Xofigo. And I think it's the only commercial supplier for Xofigo right now. So this one's really cool because we make it all domestically. All right, I'm just going to take another sip of water before I go into radiation therapy. Okay. So radiation therapy, we're going to be placing either radioactive seared near a tumor, or we're going to be working externally from a device like a linear accelerator. So we're going to be working with radionuclides that have gamma range here. So radiation therapy involves a lot of different machines. We have traditional linear accelerators where the patient is placed able and there's a beam. This linear accelerator can be combined with a machine machine. It can be combined with an MRI machine. It can be mounted on a robotic
Um, Jessica, sorry to interrupt. We're getting some feedback on your microphone. I don't know if you want to try unplugging and plugging it back in.
Okay. Give me
Oh.
1 second.
Oh, now it sounds good. Now you're okay.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. I just played around with it a little bit, so that seemed to fix it.
Cool.
But yeah, we have different devices we can use, but the one I'm going to talk about is a device called the Gamma Knife, because this actually still uses cobalt-60 sources. It actually uses 192 of them. It's a very radioactive and a lot of cobalt-60 sources. A brief history of cobalt-60. This is actually the origins of external beam radiation therapy. Before we had the technology to have linear accelerators, we used to treat cancers with like orthovoltage x-rays, which is the same thing you get when you get like an arm x-ray. It has very limited penetration. It leaves a very high skin dose, and it was just very ineffective. So they started taking these cobalt-60 sources and then mounting it on an arm, and this gave a mega voltage beam, which gave you better penetration and more skin sparing than older units. This technology came about in the 1950s. By the 1980s, modern Linux did come around and surpass most of the cobalt-60 machines besides the Gamma Knife. The Gamma Knife is like a helmet-like device where the patient's head is inserted. There's 192 cobalt-60 sources that will all localize on the tumor. And then you can collimate the beams from those 192 different sources to perfectly shape the tumor size. So some properties of cobalt-60, it initially starts as a beta decay, but then it releases two gammas that are what we actually use to penetrate and kill the cancer cells. Has a half-life of about 5.5 years with an average energy of 1.25 MeV. The practical implementation of this is that sources need to be replaced every 5 to 10 years. And this is a huge undertaking. When you need to replace sources, like the whole SWAT team will come into town because it's this big truck with all these radioactive sources. It's a big proliferation concern. And so the SWAT team will come in and they will literally shut down all the streets that are probably within like a 5-block radius, put snipers on the roof. It is a very, very serious ordeal to swap out these machines. So that's why not every hospital will have one of them. It's just a lot to undertake, and a lot to undertake with like NRC regulations as well on radioactive materials. So we start with cobalt-59. We place it into a nuclear reactor where it undergoes neutron captivation. We then harvest it and do source fabrication with it. So most of our cobalt-60 is made in power reactors. So the most important platform for this is the CANDU reactor. It has really easy harvesting, which is why we mainly use it. The CANDU reactors are very special because they can have that online refueling. So I believe they just in one of the fuel assemblies will like place their radioactive materials and be able to pull them out while having the reactor be online. They don't need to go down for it. So the CANDU reactors about 50% of our global supply. This includes places like Darlington, Bruce Power, Pickerington. We also get some of our supply, at least 20%, from Russia with our BMK reactors. We are currently completely reliant on foreign suppliers. However, there is plans for the Salem Nuclear Generating Station in New Jersey to become a commercial supplier for the US. All right, that was external beam radiation therapy. Now I'm going to talk about brachytherapy, which I talked about in the beginning. This is when you take a targeted internal radiation treatment because you place radioactive sources either directly into or near a tumor to destroy cancer cells while minimizing damage to healthy tissue. So in this treatment, applicators and catheters will be placed in or near the treatment area. A radioactive source is either temporarily inserted into these applicators, that's called HDR or high dose rate brachytherapy, or a radioactive source may be permanently left in place, and that's called low dose rate brachytherapy. But before we do these treatments, we image the patient, we determine where their seeds should go and how long they should be treated for. On the bottom, you can see how small the seeds are. They're like a grain of rice. That's for an LDR seed. For a high dose rate, it's actually the seeds like welded onto this cable. And then it's housed in an afterloader, which is just like a fancy safe that can drive the source in and out of different applicators. So we can use this for all different kinds of things. This is originally the origin of using radiation to treat malignant diseases. So you can use it in prostate cancer and insert seeds there. It's been used in breast. My clinic actually does it for the brain. So when somebody goes in for brain surgery to get a tumor resected, we'll actually place radioactive sources in there. It can be used for eye melanomas, which this is uncomfortable. I feel bad for the people who have to undergo this because they literally have to get the sources like sewed into their eye and have them placed there for 7 days. So that's one of the ones I'm a little squeamish about and I don't love doing. But the alternative is the patient losing their eye. So it provides a good alternative. And then most commonly what it's used for is gynecological cancers. So this is like cervix and endometrial cancers. We'll insert an applicator into the patient. For this one that you're seeing, it's a tandem membrane. So they'll be under anesthesia where we'll insert the tandem and treat them. It can be used for even more than this. Iridium-192 is going to be the source that we use for HDR brachytherapy. So I talked about we do GYN, prostate HDR, which you can see on the right. We insert temporary catheters through the prostate, and then we'll use a treatment planning software to plan. It can be used for skin. I live at the beach, so we have a lot of skin cancers, unfortunately, and we can drive the source out to like this domed cup that will then irradiate it. It can also be used for like lung cancers. We can place a catheter through the lung and other kinds of interstitial cases. So this half-life is about 74 days, which means we have to replace this source about quarterly. This will have photon energies of around 0.37 MeV. So that means it needs a significant amount of shielding. It needs to be located in a safe. And then the room that you're doing these procedures in needs a lot of shielding. So that's one of the consequences of having that higher energy and more radioactivity than a low dose rate brachytherapy. It's more shielding concerns and safety concerns. So it's made by taking an iridium-191 target, placing that in a reactor, and it undergoes neutron capture. And then we'll separate that and it'll be developed into a sealed source. So our current supply chain, a lot of this comes from the Netherlands, France, and Russia. We are very heavily dependent on international supply, which I think is crazy because this is our most used radioisotope in radiation therapy. We do have source fabrication and distribution capabilities, specifically with Orano. And so we're hoping for more of a partnership there and to increase the amount of Iridium-192 that we get from Orano. Because once again, this is our most common one. Almost any cancer center you work out will be using this isotope. Switching gears to our LDR brachytherapy sources. So these are reactor produced. Some of them for LDR may be accelerator produced, but I'm just going to talk about the ones that are produced in a reactor. So there's iodine-125, which is used for prostate and eye plaque brachytherapy. It has a half-life of about 60 days. Its photon energy is a lot lower than iridium-192. It's only 28 to 29 keV. Iridium was on the level of MeV. So this means that you have more rapid dose fall off and that radiation protection is a lot easier. In the bottom image, you can see a prostate that's been inserted with these seeds. They're radio opaque, meaning that you can x-ray them and see their placement. There's different source manufacturers as well. So that's just that image on that right. This starts with a xenon-124 target that's then irradiated in a reactor. It goes through neutron capture to become xenon-125. Then that decays into iodine-125, which we then prep for a seal source. So our supply chain, McMaster Nuclear Reactor in Canada is the global supplier. We actually get some from Uzbekistan, Russia. Once again, we're completely dependent on international suppliers for this radionuclide. All right, and the last radionuclide I'm going to talk about today is cesium-131. So I talked about brain surgery before with you guys. So in this, a patient will have a tumor or a tumor reoccurrence, and they'll go to the OR to have that tumor resected. And this is a collagen tile that has 4 cesium-131 seeds, and that's actually going to be placed into the surgical cavity. What's cool about this is we used to have to give them surgery, then wait for them to heal for 6 weeks, and then treat them with external beam radiation therapy. So during those 6 weeks, any microscopic disease that the surgeon may have missed had time to grow. This is immediate radiation, so it's had really good results for the patients, and that there's been a lot less cancer growth when using this gamma tile. And my site is one of the busiest sites with gamma tile. We're very, very involved in that. Has a half-life of about 10 days, so it delivers dose really quickly. And it has low energy photons, 29 to 34 keV. This means we can do it in a regular OR room. It comes in a shielded lead box, but we don't need to shield the room beyond that because it's so low energy. It has only a penetrating power of about a couple cm. This also means that we are sparing healthy brain tissues because it can only penetrate a couple cm. We start with a barium 130 target that will go through a similar process where it goes through neutron capture to create barium 131, that then decays into cesium 131. We'll take out the materials, package them into seeds, and then put them into the collagen tile. So we are reliant on Russia mainly for this. However, Gamma Tile Technologies recently bought out Isoray in Washington. And Gamma Tile is working with Oak Ridge National Lab and other DOE projects to create a domestic supply chain for cesium-131. And this image is just a CT scan of after the patient has been implanted. These titanium capsules will live in the patient for forever, but the radioactivity inside of the patient decays, and after 60 days is negligible. After 3 days, they can be released from the hospital. So I know a lot of people talk about in the nuclear industry, the need for nuclear energy is obviously increasing. A big part of that is like AI data centers, but a lot of people don't know that our radionuclide demand is increasing like crazy. This is mainly driven by the theranostics category I was telling you guys about before. Like I said, every hospital is trying to implement this program. They're doing a lot of research into more alpha emitters as well. And so this is like the biggest market in medicine that's going to grow. Right now, it's only about $4 billion, but it's projected to be over $44 billion by 2034. There's just so much research going into this. It's really, really promising for people with late stage diseases. So it's very important that we get these radionuclides for them. This will obviously increase the demand for reactor-produced isotopes and more stable targets. So all of this is a super fragile supply chain. Once again, we're reliant on a small number of specialized facilities. And since the half-life of this material is on the order of days or hours, you can't stockpile this material. You either use it right after it's made or you can't use it at all. There's been unplanned reactor outages or shutdowns that have limited our production capability. For example, there was Chalk River in Canada, and that was one of the world's most important isotope producers, but it was permanently shut down in March of 2018. And so that made the global supply chain rely more heavily on other producers. Another incident of this is with the high flux reactor in the Netherlands. They had scheduled maintenance and it created technetium-99m shortages in the United States. So there was a long wait list for patients to get these radionuclides. So something I think we can learn from is how Canada's responded to this incident. So I was talking about before, CANDU reactors are very valuable because they can support isotope production while also generating power. This once again goes back to how they're made, right? You can have online refueling. You can pull out fuel assemblies without having to shut down the whole reactor, which means you can put in assemblies that have the base material to these radionuclides. So an important isotope production is Bruce Power. They're going to be producing a lot of the lutetium-177. They're intending to increase their supply to help with theranostics, and they're adding another unit to help when there's another unit that may be offline to help compensate. And overall, Ontario has stated a goal to double medical isotope production by 2030. Darlington has followed a similar path where they've gone through different licenseship to get more lutetium-177, cobalt-60, yttrium-90 on all 4 of their units. And they're already on track to deliver the molybdenum-99. I personally think that it's like we have a good relationship with Canada, but I still think that domestic production really, really matters. I think that personally we've been relying on too much foreign supply chains, because when you have something, once again, you listen to the news and there's shipping disruptions in the Middle East, any materials we're getting from there that are even delayed by a day or two are not usable anymore. And overall geopolitical instability, even like our relationship with Canada, can threaten our access to these critical medical materials that, once again, literally save lives, help detect cancer, help kill cancer. So it's not great to be relying on other countries, even if there's something not bad happening geopolitically. We saw what the COVID outbreak can do, right, to supply chains and how hard it was to get medical care during that time. So the US luckily is investing in domestic isotope production. Once again, they invested in that Shine Technologies, which is almost done. And then Oronel, Oak Ridge National Lab, is trying to step up and become a major isotope producer. They're trying to right now meet the demand for over 20 radioisotopes that are not currently being produced in sufficient volumes. The Department of Energy is also building the U.S. Stable Isotope Production and Research Center, but Oronel cannot alone replace the entire foreign isotope supply chain. It needs to be worked as a coordinated effort throughout national labs in the United States. And we don't have the same power reactor capabilities as Canada because most of our reactors here can't be refueled online. So this really is going to come from our national lab system here. All right. In conclusion, radionuclides support major branches of medicine. Each isotope has a unique production pathway, but they all depend on a complex nuclear supply chain. The next era of nuclear medicine will be defined by expanding theranostic use, which will then increase the need for reactor, accelerator, enrichment, and radiochemistry capacity. And then a resilient supply chain requires investment in domestic production. If you're Canada, it depends on power reactor isotope production. In the United States, our national lab infrastructure is going to come into this in a big way. All right. Thank you, guys. I'll turn it over to questions for you guys because I know I've been talking for a little while.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica. This is really just an amazing amount of information. And we may have had a small audience here, but it was a quality audience because I think there are people from the medical profession who probably really appreciated what you talked about. Eric, do you want to kind of moderate some Q&A? I think it's a small enough group that he could probably just let people also just ask questions directly, perhaps.
Yeah, I was under the impression there was going to be a test on all the content that was just covered for all the people who showed up. Just kidding. First of all, yeah, I want to say it's the thing that stood out was in your you mentioned you are a cat owner and that you were very touched by what is it, iodine 131 therapy for reversing
Yeah.
hyperthyroidism. My wife is a
Yeah.
veterinarian, so we had that procedure on our cat as well a few years ago. And so it was a one shot, one-time treatment that cured her hyperthyroidism. So I actually am a beneficiary of this technology too. We have that in common.
Yeah, it's just funny having a radioactive cat in your house because around my house, I'm sure you guys are nerds too, but we have like radio code and we also have a Geiger counter for fun. So you could actually just like measure your cat. It was insane.
Awesome. Awesome. Um, anybody who wants to ask a question, you're welcome to ask in the chat. And we have a small enough group where you can also put up your hand and I'll just call on you if you feel like talking. Um, I have a few questions just to throw at you. You mentioned you were, if I'm not mistaken, a nuclear engineering undergrad at UF and then got your master's in medical physics from Duke. How did you get started? How did you get inspired by this? Was it more on the medical side to begin with or more on the side?
So I got inspired on the medical side. One day I like came to my dad and I was like, I want to be a pharmacist or something because I wanted to work in healthcare, but I wanted to work more on the behind the scenes, very scientific work going on. Because a lot of medicine and being a practitioner is actually an art. And I wanted to be a part of bringing more of the science and math into that art. And my dad was an accountant at a radiation oncology staffing company. So he was like, I actually know something better than a pharmacist. He was like, you should check this out. And so starting at 16, started volunteering in cancer centers and getting to shadow. And when I originally went to University of Florida, I saw on their catalog that they had a pre-medical physics degree. So I went to go sign up for that. And then they told me they didn't have it anymore. And so I was looking through trying to find something that would be the most applicable. And so I started going down the rabbit hole of nuclear engineering, and I decided to pick that for my major. And honestly, I know you guys are all nuclear engineers, but that was like a really, really hard thing to do. It was probably the hardest degree I have is my nuclear engineering degree. But I'm surprised how passionate it made me about, expanding reactors and about our energy processes in the United States. So even though I always wanted to work in medical, I did develop like a deep love and care for the nuclear energy industry. And I kind of try to work now to pair the two.
Awesome, awesome. And just to correct you, we're not all nuclear engineers. I'm more of a
Okay.
nuclear
Well,
cheerleader, if anything. Um,
yes,
but well, what were you going to say?
no, you're good. Go ahead.
As a nuclear cheerleader, a big critique of nuclear energy from people that want to ban nuclear is the specter of causing cancer, possibly. And so there's so
Mhm.
many people that raise this question of, oh, this might cause cancer. Is this going to increase cancer? And so we try to develop arguments to say, well, we want to keep the lights on at hospitals and we want to reduce air pollution from coal plants that causes way more cancer, and we want to power AI bots to develop gene-specific cancer treatments. But the best argument of all is medical isotopes. So I don't know if you have had experience in the kind of like advocacy side, maybe even in quiet private life and conversations, and if you have any advice of for people who want to promote nuclear energy, how to incorporate the message of how medical isotopes can really reduce people dying from cancer, the exact opposite of what it's being accused of.
Yeah. So as far as risk and how I talk to the public, I think that this is where nuclear energy and people who work in nuclear policy can learn a lot from medical physics because every single day we are able to convince people to get strapped onto a table while we point a gamma ray at their head. And now you may think like, that's crazy. Why would a person agree to do that? That's because when we communicate with them, they know that the risk of the cancer they have is way bigger than the risk of getting this treatment. And I think if we were able to communicate the risk of pollution in the same way that we communicate like healthcare risk, it would help people a lot. If people understood what actually is going to cause them to have cancer is the pollution we have in our environment from these fossil fuels. People come in every single day with lung cancers from them. They cause so many cases of COPD. And so I think if people really kind of like took a chart of like fossil fuels, this is how likely they are to kill you, versus nuclear energy, this is how likely it is to harm you in any way. If we were able to communicate those risks more efficiently and more kind of like we do in the healthcare field, I think it would be really beneficial.
Risk assessment, that's key. I think we got a question from Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. This was wow. There was so much we've learned there. You repeatedly said that this all works, or the therapy part works, because cancer cells are more sensitive to radiation.
Mhm.
They die quicker. Can you elaborate on that? And then, like on a side note, when people talk about dirty bombs, I'm like, don't worry about nuclear waste. Just guard those cobalt sources in hospitals. I assumed they were totally unguarded, but you're saying it's like SWAT team guard, and how are they
Oh,
guarded inside the hospital?
yeah. So, to answer the first question on why cancer cells are more radiosensitive than healthy cells. So there's two things that there's more than two things. There's like four or five things that make them more radiosensitive. But the main one is going to be that cells that are rapidly dividing are more radiosensitive than cells that are not dividing. Because if you target a cell during the process of it dividing with radiation, it doesn't have time to repair that damage. If you target a cell when it's not um, growing and like reproducing and going through mitosis, then it's going to have time to repair damage for radiation. Since cancer cells are rapidly in this mitosis stage, they're in a more sensitive stage almost all the time. And that's why when we hit them, they don't have time to repair. There's other properties about cancer as well, like they're not very well oxygenated and stuff like that, that also make them more radiosensitive. But it's mainly going to be coming from the fact that they're rapidly in mitosis where they can't repair any damage. Um, as far as the cobalt 60 sources, they are not just hanging around the NRC. We're regulated by the NRC as well when it comes to any radioactive material. So in the hospital, it's going to be, especially with gamma tile or any radionuclide, it's going to be in a shielded, safe system in which only an engineer has the mechanisms of opening up that safe and removing the source. On top of that, it's going to be behind 2 or 3 locked doors that are going to have access to only 5 people in the facility. So you have to go through 2 or 3 locked doors. You have to know how to turn the machine on. Then you'd have to know and have the equipment that the engineer has to remove these sources. They're incredibly, incredibly difficult to if somebody wanted to grab them, like honestly, good luck. They're incredibly, incredibly difficult to remove. So, and the SWAT team will
Good
be there
relief.
too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome.
I think we have a question from Jawaz.
Hi, sorry for coming in a bit late here, but I'm just curious, did this just start or is it ending right now?
We started about an hour ago, and we're going to have a hard end at I think about 9 p.m., but this will be available on YouTube. So you can look us up, Nuclear New York, on YouTube.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think we have another question from James.
Uh, yes, thank you so much. I'm definitely not a nuclear engineer. I'm a simple country doctor in practice for about 40 years. So I deeply respect the role that both diagnostically and therapeutically, that radiation has. Currently, I'm involved with an environmental group that is, along with all the rest of us, trying to figure out what our response should be to various energy shenanigans that come up in our communities. So, nuclear energy is high on my list of things that I think we ought to be pursuing. One of the things that I'm curious about is you made reference to the fact that most of our nuclear reactors in this country are not equipped to make isotopes, and I guess I don't really, but yet in Canada they are. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
What is it about? I mean, what is it about the makeup of the reactor and the process? Because it seems to me that should be a no-brainer if they can have a side effect of creating beneficial radioisotopes and to help with health issues, that they ought to be doing it. Is it a lot more expensive, or what's the reason?
Yeah, so I guess I want to preface this with I haven't been a nuclear engineer practicing at least in a couple of years, but I'm going to pull on all the information I have from undergrad to answer that question as best as I can. Feel free to fact check me afterwards. But in Canada, to get around proliferation concerns of highly enriched uranium that we are able to have in the United States, they created a type of reactor that uses a different, I believe, like coolant and moderator that's like a heavy water reactor. And so they were going through the design process of trying to figure out how to create reactors without the highly enriched uranium and going through their design process, they actually were able to create a type of reactor that has what we call online refueling. So we every 3 to 5 years, the fuel rods in a nuclear reactor need to be removed if they're spent or reshuffled. And in Canada, they created a system with their reactors that allows them to remove and replace fuel assemblies while the reactor is still online. All the other fuel assemblies are in and still working. In the United States, when we have to remove our fuel assemblies for the type of reactors we have to shut down the reactor. And that happens every 3 to 5 years with maintenance. And that's why we can't just go into the reactor and pull out any isotopes in a fuel assembly that we have put there. Canada, I believe, has a system where they can make a fuel assembly that has the building blocks of those radionuclides, and then while keeping that reactor online, remove that fuel assembly, harvest the materials, and then put another fuel assembly with like fresh building blocks back in. Once again, I think you should fact check me on that, but like from what I learned in undergrad, I'm pretty sure that's how the mechanism works.
So they've kind of created a spigot where they can pull off the technetium or the cobalt or whichever they're trying to get.
Yeah. And so in the United States, we're more reliant on like research reactors at universities or national labs because our power reactors wouldn't be efficient. They would only be able to harvest this material every 3 to 5 years when the reactor is shut down.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, I know Dr. Chris Kiefer, he's an ER physician in Canada who's a nuclear advocate and has spoken about applications of medical isotopes. Um, is that sort of like that's like the flagship as our friendly neighbors to the north, the Darlington and Bruce with the CANDU reactors in terms of their design? But are there other designs that are sort of ideal for this? I know that Oklo, I think, has promoted their reactor. They have a sodium-cooled fast reactor as being more applicable for medical isotopes. But ultimately, could any reactor produce this? It's just about efficiency.
Yeah, there's some reactors in the United States that some of their main purpose is just to produce radioisotopes. So I was talking about the University of Missouri research reactor they put in. They mainly put in that machine, not just to do testing for the university, but to produce a lot of our radioisotopes. Same thing with the high flux neutron reactor at Oak Ridge National Lab. That is like a DOE national security process where they're creating this reactor for the purpose of radioisotopes. So there's other flagships we can use. I just think it's personally cool that when we're going through a period in our history where we have such an increased demand of energy that and also an increased demand of theranostic use, I just find it really cool that Canada's like, oh, we can do both at the same time. I think that's just awesome.
I agree. And there's not like a specific level of enrichment required to make medical isotopes. Like you could make it with HALEU or low enriched or whatever.
Yeah, so it used to be historically that it was all highly enriched uranium, but the NNSA and other like proliferation groups started developing ways. So now that we use most of our isotopes are produced in low enriched uranium reactors. Yeah. So
All right. I think we got a question from Keith.
Yeah, just on that topic, I mean, it's just a neutron bombardment, right? I mean, I suspect that the type of it's the mechanics of the reactor that make the CANDU more conducive more than any other thing, whether it being not that it's heavy water or not heavy water, or it's probably just the mechanics of it. I think the CANDU reactor is a horizontally loaded fuel assembly kind of situation as opposed to vertical, and maybe that has something to do with being able to pull things out on the fly. But my question though was about the short duration of there's an echo I got over here. The short duration that we've got. I'm getting an echo. I'm trying to talk. Yeah. The short duration of the lifespan of some of the isotopes you're trying to use. When you do that, does that cause you to? I understand you have to use it quickly, or otherwise it's no good anymore. When it's no good anymore, does it decay to a benign stable isotope, or is that also something that you have to be careful what to do with it afterwards?
Yeah, so there's strict waste management policies in the hospital, specifically more for nuclear medicine, because with like iridium 192 that has a 74-day half-life, we send that back to the vendor and then they dispose of it. But anything that has a half-life of less than 60 days, we have to decay in storage in the hospital. So we have specialized rooms that are shielded that people can only get in through badge access, where we actually have to hold all this material, log everything that we're holding, and then prove to the state, like we see in the licensing agencies, okay, we've actually decayed this, we've measured it, it's benign now, and then can then send it to a waste processing facility. Another thing that like complicates that is now this is not just nuclear waste, it's like biohazard waste, because it's a lot of times like sharps and needles we've injected in people. So there's a lot of processes we have to go through to properly dispose. But for radionuclides specifically with a short half-life, most of those are going to be decayed in storage until they're benign. And then we'll reach out to a waste facility to take them away.
My wife actually had a question that if she could jump in and ask it. She's having trouble getting on her cell phone. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, do you work with like the radiologist and oncologist and surgeon to figure out what type of radioisotope to use? Because I noticed several of them are for prostate cancer or metastatic cancer. Does one work better than the other? How does that get determined? And how do you figure out which one? And since you have such a short time to use it, I'm just curious how that works.
Yeah, so I do work with, specifically in radiation therapy, I work with radiation oncologists, so people who are specialized in the treatment of cancer with radiation. I don't work too much with radiologists in my specific setup, but other medical physicists do. How we determine what radionuclide to use. So all HDR sources in the United States are going to be iridium 192. So that was that afterloader I showed you that has a source on a wire. That's our most common radionuclide that I use every day. That's just going to be iridium 192. There's two providers of that within the United States, of a company called Variant and Electa, and they both come with the same kind of source. So we don't really have a choice there. For the theranostics, so the injectable radiopharmaceuticals that actually kill cancer, there are different manufacturers that you can go to. For instance, I talked about Xofigo, which is a theranostic that uses radium. And then there is Pluvicto, which is a prostate radionuclide that is based off lutetium. That honestly mainly comes down to the doctor's expertise, not my own as a medical physicist. I can help read research papers and help guide them to a better one, but that really is physician dependent, and it depends on what kind of research they've looked into. I will say, I think Pluvicto seems to be the one that most people are going to. I think it's shown a little bit of better results than Xofigo, but that comes down to more of the medical expertise of the doctor for what theranostic they want to use. And then a medical physicist more is to help them get the licensing in place, all the radiation safety concerns to help them plan it. But a lot of that is just what radioisotope you use depends on the physician that's treating.
I think we got a question from Tim, our man in Boston.
I just wanted to point out on the question of the Canadian style reactors. They do exist in other countries. South Korea has some, Romania has some, Argentina has a single CANDU reactor. And I think China and India and Pakistan as well. So they do exist outside of Canada.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's some of the stuff where since I've left the nuclear field a little bit that I wasn't exactly sure on. So thank you.
I got a few more questions for you. Other than uh, declaring world peace and building more nuclear power plants, do you have kind of like a wish list for, I don't know, policy change at NRC or FDA or trade agreements or something like that that would enable more medical isotopes? Or do you think it's just we need to draw more attention to it and
I think a lot of
oh, I think
of course,
we
yeah,
your audio is messed up again. Sorry.
that better.
I think you need to tweak it a little bit more.
Okay. What about now?
Yes, I think it's okay. Yeah.
Nope, I lost it completely. Give me 1 second.
We're hearing
Okay,
you
can you
fine
see
now.
me now or hear me now?
Yeah, yeah, we can see you and hear you.
Okay. So my wish list would be I think that our national labs are underfunded at the moment. I think that if this was brought to their attention, I know there's already been people lobbying up this group's lobbying for more nuclear reactors for energy, but I think if this was part of the conversation as well, working with the departments of like Department of Energy and other national security firms would work really well for getting more theranostic use. So yeah, I would just say bring attention to it.
Cool. We'll try.
Yeah.
And in addition to cancer treatment, are there other possibilities for new applications of medical isotopes, like maybe for Alzheimer's or cardiac problems or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we're exploring with what we can do with radiation. So it's not just for cancer. In my field, we also treat people with other diseases, one of which is like trigeminal neuralgia. So it's like a bad bundle of nerves by your brainstem. We can actually irradiate that and get rid of those bad bundles, and it relieves a lot of pain for the patients. Right now, we're doing osteoarthritis treatments. So it's a low dose radiation treatment to like hands, feet, knees. For people who have tried almost everything with osteoarthritis and can't get better, we found that radiation is really good for inflammation. In Canada, they're experimenting with radiation treatments for mental illness in the brain. So there is a lot of things we don't know yet, and a lot of things that we're still discovering. But I think so far it's all been very promising. But no, it's not just cancer. We treat other ailments as well.
Cool. Medical tourism to Canada coming up. And you were talking about kind of the difference in scarcity of the different isotopes. Is that mostly just like supply and demand, or is there like a technological reason why certain isotopes are cheaper and more available than others?
For the ones that are like commercially available, that's more supply and demand. But there is some technological stuff with some new theranostics, like actinium 225, I want to say, is an alpha emitter that's being investigated um, for use for cancer treatments. And that one's more of a technological one. So it just kind of depends on the radioisotope and how far along it is in its FDA and research process. But for the most of the ones I talked about today, it's more of a supply and demand.
I think we got another one from Keith.
Yeah, actually, on that very same subject, my wife was wanted had a follow-up. She was wanting to know, have you ever encountered a situation where you had a shortage, because it wasn't available, and then you had to resort to some other isotope or, perhaps a less effective process because you had a shortage?
Personally, I have not, but I am 27. I'm in my second year of residency. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens to be. My clinic is mainly external beam radiation therapy, so there's not iridium 192 is pretty well supplied right now for the brachytherapy. Our linear accelerators run off nuclear energy, so as long as our power plant in Wilmington works, we are fine there. And we just started a theranostics program. That's stuff that hospitals have just been starting in the past 5 years. So that I know of, there hasn't been that bad of a shortage issue yet, but we anticipate that we will have shortage issues.
Keith,
Another,
I can give you a story, a personal story. Technetium, there was this is a diagnostic uh, isotope, but technetium is the marker of choice for, as Jessica was saying, for myocardial imaging. And I had the misfortune to have a heart attack when I was 51, which was a long time ago. And it was a couple of years later, and I had a follow-up. Uh, I had a follow-up stress test done, and my wife and I took a trip to Canada. And there was a technetium shortage, and so they used thallium, which was an old-fashioned isotope that was used to image the heart, and much longer half-life. And I think that's correct, isn't it? Much longer half-life than technetium.
Mhm.
So it was like two or
Yeah.
3 weeks later, and we're coming back into the United States, and these agents ran out. We were like the third car back, and these agents ran out to my car and got me out of the car and said, "Sir, have you had any procedures done?" And I didn't think of it as a procedure; it was a test. I had forgotten about it, and finally, the agent who actually knew what he was doing and had the Geiger counter came out and took me behind the building and said, I said, "Is that thallium that you're seeing on your on your imaging?" And he said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Did you have a stress test?" So there was a shortage of, I think that can happen, and technetium. I think you made reference to that it sometimes
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
short
I don't
supply.
work Yeah, I don't work in diagnostic nuclear medicine, which is probably why I haven't seen any shortages personally. I work more in the therapy side, but I know in
Mhm.
COVID they had problems getting technetium. And yeah, we give people cards when we inject them with anything. And they'll walk around with a card exactly for the same reason of if they go to the airport or if they go to a border crossing, we don't want people with guns storming them. We want them to
They have
storm
to
people.
remember that they have a card though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't want to get another heart attack from the shock of
Well,
cops harassing you.
it was entertaining as it turned out.
That's good.
Now I can
Um,
tell the story.
as a kind of a techno optimist nuke bro, I have fantasies of, oh, everyone will have a microreactor in their house and a 3D printer and an Optimus robot to do the chores, etc. Do you think we could extend this fantasy to every hospital can have a microreactor that produces its own medical isotopes someday? Or do you think this is kind of a far-fetched fantasy?
No, I would love it because while at the same time we need radionuclides, we use AI all the time. In our hospitals, our whole basements are getting turned into AI data centers.
Right.
And we're struggling a lot with power supplies through our hospital. That's a whole nother presentation I can give on how we're integrating AI and what it's doing to our energy uses and cost. So I would love if we had a reactor that could power our data centers and produce our isotopes all in one place. That'd be amazing. And it's not far-fetched because a lot of hospital systems have their own cyclotrons. And if you're a very fancy hospital system, like when I worked at Duke, they had like a whole giant cyclotron in the Raleigh area that they would use for different productions of like rare isotopes. So, yeah.
I want to make sure I really understood what you said there. Are you saying that your hospitals have data center equipment in them actually at the hospital to do some of the analysis that you're talking about?
Oh my God, yeah, we have massive. If you, I mean, I haven't even gotten to tour it myself, but underneath most major hospitals, you're going to come to what almost is like a mini data center, because there's so much patient information. There's so many softwares we're using. There's AI that we're using for a lot of our images and treatment planning. So if you go into the basement of a hospital, they'll have their own server rooms and they're massive, and we're always running out of space in them. We're always expanding them.
Wow,
It's yeah, the data storage issue in for hospitals is like a really big energy drain. So yeah,
that's really fascinating.
And
Yeah.
yours is at
yeah.
Duke, right? Duke University.
I was at Duke. That's where they had their own giant cyclotron. I'm at a smaller center now, but we still have like our whole data center server room that's massive. I trust me, if you ever go to a hospital and just look at people's screen, like there's just a massive amount of information we have to store. I mean, one CT scan is hundreds of images, and we take a CT scan like every 5 minutes, maybe less. So it's just a lot of data.
So some good can come from AI too, is what you're telling us, which I think
I
we
have
would agree
seen some
with.
good.
Yeah,
I have seen firsthand. I know there's like the debate if it's morally good or bad. It depends on what you're using it for, but
sure.
I have seen it make it so we can see patients a lot faster. For instance, when you treatment plan a patient, you have to take CT images, there's hundreds. And we used to have to manually draw the heart. We used to have to manually draw the spinal cord. And it was a process that would take a day or two just to segment the organs. Now it's done in 5 minutes with AI. And so we
Wow.
can see a buttload of more patients. So,
Hmm. I was really fascinated by what you showed in the very beginning about what Marie Curie did. I always think of her as, the researcher who learned about how radiation worked. I did not realize that she was actually involved in turning it into a application of treating people with some of the setups that you showed there. How did she know that? How did she think to put something radioactive against people to make them better?
um, that's a great question. I don't know if I can answer that because I'm not her. I know that in the early stages, they didn't have clinical trials like we had now. So when you discovered something new, you just did kind of whatever you wanted with her. Like I think a couple of years after she found polonium, she was already loaning it out to doctors, and just like was like, here, take some of this material, see what you can do with it. I think especially with the cancer field, it was able to boom really quickly because there's kind of this sad expectation that a cancer patient's going to die without treatment, right? Like their disease is going to progress. So if I do something and it doesn't work and they still die, like they were going to kind of pass
Okay.
away anyways.
Oh,
But if I do something and then they live, like I'm a hero. So it kind of, I think, was guns off to the races as far as people with diseases that were terminal, with investigating radioactivity on them.
gotcha. Okay.
Well, that's all the time we have, I think. So these are, if anything, very good reasons to build more nuclear power, and hopefully we can incorporate this information on medical isotopes to deliver to everyone around us for yet another reason to build more nuclear. So thank you so much, Jessica. This was a lot of information packed in a short period of time. We really appreciate you taking the time for us.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for having me. If you have any questions, I know that at least Keith, Lava, and Eric, you guys have my contacts, so feel free to reach out to me if there's anything else you need.
Yeah. Well, if you're not already, you should be a social media influencer on this topic. So I
I
don't know if
agree.
you want to drop your Instagram or whatever, but if you don't, you should in the future.
I'll consider it. I'm not really a social media person, but I've been told I'm a okay public speaker, so maybe I'll have to check it out.
Gross understatement. Yes, get on on the social media immediately. So thank you so much.
Okay.
Really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. We'll do this again.
Yeah. Thank you,
All right.
everybody.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.